All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal and Patreon are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. Also, if you want to get a hold of the graphs used in this video and all kinds of other different graphs, those will be through a Google folder link in the description below. So it's time for the monthly oil demand levels update, with world total oil demand at the moment being up just above 104.2 million barrels per day. The largest consumer comprising that being obviously still the US, staying roughly around 20 million barrels per day for the last 20 years or so, and most recently coming in pretty much right on the line at 20.4. China starting to look like it might be hitting its peak as they've begun to level off for the last few years around 17 or so, sometimes closer to 18. For the last few months, they've been a bit below 17, this time coming in at 16.6 million barrels per day. India, meanwhile, has continued climbing and has almost reached 6 million barrels per day, getting as high as about 5.88 recently. But over the last few months, they've dropped down a bit, now down to 5.78 million barrels per day. Japan, once up at 6 million barrels per day at their demand peak decades ago, has declined over time because of fuel efficiency, mass public transit use, and the aging of their population, now down to usually between 3.5 and 4, and this time coming in under their present day average at 3.21. Russia within the USSR, not the USSR as a whole, just Russia within the USSR, had a demand level of about 5 million barrels per day before the collapse. Post collapse, they dropped down close to 2, and as their economy recovered and came back into existence over the last few decades, they climbed back up close to 4, dropped with everybody else when COVID happened, recovered from that. But in the aftermath of invading Ukraine and all the economic fallout and internal stuff since then, they have dropped down and stayed closer to 3, this time coming in at 3.2 as they're getting into their summer high. South Korea leveling off around 2.8 or so for a fair bit now, and they're about to start heading down as their demographic setup is pretty similar to Japan's. They came in this time basically right on point at 2.83 million barrels per day. Saudi Arabia fluctuates between 2 and 3 throughout the year, as during the summer months, their demand is much higher because it's a lot hotter and their electricity demand goes up. And they still do generate a fair bit of their electricity from oil fired power generation. However, they have brought additional gas fired power generation online recently, along with some solar projects. So that has recently this year started to bring their oil-fired power generation down, which is helping to keep their numbers a bit further constrained. And along with a number of other recent factors, their demand has, for their April numbers at least, because theirs is a bit staggered, after having climbed up to about 2.2 and starting to make their way up, they actually came down abruptly to 1.84. Brazil never returning to the same demand levels it had before its economic turmoil began in the 2010s, has fluctuated throughout the mid and lower twos, dropping once again down to a flat 2 recently, now coming back up in domestic consumption to about 2.15 million barrels per day. Canada in present day usually around 2.5, coming down a bit under this time at 2.35. Indonesia hasn't updated for 2 months, but most recently they were at 2.08, which is about where they usually are now. They're tending to average above 2, usually between 2 and 2.2 or 2.3. Germany, on the other hand, is now down to averaging around 2, having gradually declined from a all-time high average of 3 decades back. This time they came in at 2.12 million barrels per day. Iran would normally be a bit under 2 million barrels per day. However, because of recent events and the abrupt halt of quite a lot of business and industry in the country, they have had a temporary abrupt drop. First, first down to 1.3, and now apparently down close to only 800,000 barrels per day. Mexico was also once up at 2 million, even after the but even after recovering from COVID, their Demand levels never returned to their prior normal, only getting as high sometimes as 1.6. This time they're down at 1.35. France, post COVID, settled around 1.6 as their average, and this time they're down at 1.44. The UK had been more up at 1.6 before COVID, but post COVID has stayed lower, usually around 1.5, this time coming in at 1.42. Italy has declined down to now usually averaging around 1.3, this time coming in at 1.43. And Spain is also usually at 1.3 million barrels per day as well, this time coming in closer to normal at 1.35. Thailand is basically leveling off here around 1.2 or 1.3, this time coming in at 1.18 million barrels per day. And Turkey is continuing to climb at a uneven rate. They're up to usually around 1.2 or 1.3 million barrels per day in present day, this time coming in right at a flat 1.2. Singapore peaked up at about 1.4 million barrels per day and has since declined down to averaging more around 1.2 and starting to head down to 1.1. This time they came in back up at 1.29. The UAE, meanwhile, is up to about 1.1 or 1.2 on average, and that's why they want to up their production plateau to 4 million barrels per day instead of the 3 million they normally hold at, as they want to broaden their export margin again. And this time they came in a bit under 1.2. Australia is normally around 1.1, this time coming in just under it at 1.09 million barrels per day. And now going to countries with less than a million barrels per day of consumption. Nederland is or was post COVID usually holding around 1 million for a few years. Now they've started averaging more closer to 900,000. This time they're a bit up though at 976. Taiwan averaged around 1 million for about 20 years or so. But recently, especially post-COVID, they've been going down and have been averaging more around 900, but typically a bit below it. This time they're down at 824. Egypt in present day is normally up in the 800s. This time they came in down at 711. However, Malaysia is also usually up in the 800s, but this time they came in down once again, just like the last few months, close to 600 at only 607. Iraq is also normally in the 800s in present day, and this time they came in a bit down at 730. Poland has grown up to about 800,000 in present day, and this time they came in not too far down at 748. Belgium was previously around 700, but they've been declining, making their way down closer to 600. This time they came in back further up, though, to 670. Nigeria in present day has reached the 600s for their domestic consumption, gradually making their way towards averaging more around 700, this time coming in at 651,000 barrels per day. Colombia in present day has grown up to averaging roughly 500,000. This time, though, they've dropped down to 407. The Philippines also averages about 500,000 in present day, and the last time they released exact data was quite a number of months ago, but I was able to rough out a general line for them, and they have stayed, it looks like, basically right around 500,000, at least roughly rounded. Algeria is also close to 500,000, and this time they are back down a bit to 459,000. My AC air conditioner is about to turn on because there's a heat wave going on, so if you hear that in the background, I apologize. South Africa, because of the fact that it's gradually imploding and falling apart, has been heading lower and lower in terms of their oil consumption levels, seeing that play out through stair steps and pitfalls that they then don't entirely come back up from. They were once up around or above 600,000 barrels per day, and then they got down to averaging more around 500,000 for a while. Now, over the last couple of years, they've been descending from that further, just like with their electricity demand. That primarily being because their power grid has broken down and decayed so much to the point where it can't provide all of the demand that the country is seeking. South Africa's most recent oil demand levels came in at 431,000 barrels per day. Kazakhstan, unfortunately, did not update this month, but last time they had broken their all time domestic consumption record, getting all the way up to about 610,000 barrels per day. Whereas for their rough average, they're usually in the mid or upper 400s. Chile in present day is usually leveled off around 400. It looks like this is where they're going to stay. And this time they came in basically right within normal range at 391. Ecuador has reached and exceeded 300,000 for its average, coming in this time at 333. Peru has just about reached 300,000. Last time they actually updated, they were at 283, but that was a number of months ago. Morocco is up to or actually above 300,000 on average now, although they only update every few months, and last time they were just a bit under it at 290. Sweden is usually around 300 in present day, and they came in decently down at 238. Greece is normally around 300, and they came in only a bit down at 278. Romania is usually at 250, but they came in way down at 191. Portugal is also usually at 250, and they came in decently down as well, but still over 200 at 210,000 barrels per day. And then in quick succession, the group of countries that average roughly around 200,000, a bit above or a bit below, starting with Austria, this time coming in at 243, the Czech Republic coming in at 212, Hungary coming in at 194,000 barrels per day, and Switzerland also coming in at the same number, 194. Finland coming in decently down at 156. Norway coming in elevated at 249, and New Zealand coming in decently down as well at 155. All right, that's it for everyone who's been included in this one this time. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon and YouTube membership button stuff, that's all down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. The link to the Drive folder with these graphs and all different kinds of other graphs across all different types of data and subjects is in the description, along with links to my photography and my blue sky. There's a link to my cat's YouTube channel in the top pinned comment. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.